Morning, everyone.
Look.
We'll just give it a couple of minutes for people to enter, and then we'll kick off at 10 o'clock on the dot. Okay, so we might crack on because we have quite a bit to get through today and just admit some more people as they come through. Welcome everyone to our webinar series of Informed Decisions or .id. For those that don't know me, my name is Lisa Harwood. I am the Principal Policy Advisor, Economic Development at WALGA. And for those of you that haven't heard about our partners today.id, they provide a range of online tools and consulting services around demographic, housing, and economic trends to support local area decision making. So today they're going to take you through a range of insights when it comes to housing, workforce and livability. And we know that these topics are of critical importance to you. So there's often a need for more data in this space, and they're going to take you through some of the data that they have available. And then, feel free to ask questions about whether or not they can pull certain data sets or do certain analysis as well. Just a few things before we kick off to note. The session will be recorded, so just switch off your camera if you don't want to be included. The reason for this, we've created a bit of a library of economic development webinars on the WALGA website, so you have a resource to return to at any time, and we obviously want to add these as well to that resource. Most popular question always when it comes to webinars, yes, the slides will be sent around afterwards, so don't worry about that. You'll get a copy. There'll be plenty of time for questions. But we do ask for you to just hold on to these until the end of the presentation. So you can either raise your hand, pop in the Q&A function, and we'll kind of facilitate those. That's pretty much it for me. I'm going to hand you over to the data experts now. So today we have Glenn, Crystal and Boris. So I'm going to hand over to Crystal first. I think she's going to kick it off.
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, I will. Hi, everyone. I'm Crystal from ID. I'm one of the housing consultants and client success managers here. And I've got a background in local government and in housing. So I'll be taking you through some of these slides today and have some colleagues here with me taking you through the rest. What we'll go through today is we'll be covering the impact of demographic shifts and how you can look at each of these and what data sets to look at to help measure, monitor and plan for demographic changes. We'll be giving you an overview of metropolitan WA or Greater Perth, and we'll be using some examples of that regional overview, regional meaning that Greater Perth metro umbrella, and some local government examples too. And keep in mind that these examples, these data sets are available at your local government area level, but for the sake of today, we're giving the Greater Statistical Area overview. And then throughout all of this, we hope that you will see that path of how to get ahead of the game. So looking at the data sets that we demonstrate today, naturally from ID, we'll be using our tools, the Profile Atlas, Forecast, Economic Profile, Housing Monitor and Community Views. Some of you will be familiar with some or all of these. And if not, that's fine. You'll understand through the data sets, we're just showing you the types of data that you will want to be tracking to have the greatest impact. To get started, we're just going to do a little quick activity. So if you could get your phones out and scan this QR code, and I will do the same just to make sure everything is working correctly, because we'll be using this Mentimeter for some trivia a little bit later on, which Greg, our trivia master, he's actually a trivia master and a data with, will be hosting. So if you can just grab out your phones and scan that, I will now change screens to bring up said Mentimeter, which people are already populating, so thank you. So why growing pains? Why did we title this presentation Growing Pains? So just to get a sense from everyone in the room, we've got infrastructure, slow infrastructure, rapid population, rapid change population, infrastructure needs migration, housing affordability, more services. We've got 9 people in the room. That's almost looking like 9 responses. Oh, we had a bit more there. Let's go back. Lack of infrastructure, slow infrastructure, infrastructure, population, migration. So no prizes here because I have no idea who answered what. When we do this in the room, we'd be throwing chocolates at you. So unfortunately for you, not happening today. Thank you for bearing with me while I switch back over. The answer is extraordinary international migration coupled with a return to inward domestic migration is placing pressure on housing, services and infrastructure. Glenn will be showing you the components of this population growth in a few slides ahead. So how do these demographic shifts like migration, ageing and changing economic environment impact Perth, Greater Perth? To start us off, we'll cross over now to our man on the ground, Boris, who many of you will already know, and he'll outline some of the challenges and opportunities of demographic shifts unique to your region. Thank you, Boris.
Thanks, Crystal. Hey, everyone. As Crystal mentioned, I'm the local rep here in WA for ID. And it looks like all of you have already sort of guessed my part here around some of the challenges through that Mentimeter exercise. So WA always has a traditional mining boom and bust economy, although we've been the fastest growing state, 2.8% of growth last year, reflecting sort of the 2010s migration boom. However, this time it looks like it's continuing to boom. As mentioned previously, lots of high construction costs and skilled labour shortages all around, and we've got competing infrastructure projects and priorities such as Metronet, Westport, AUKUS, Perth Airport, all on the books. WA also has a traditionally very low density, and there's some community opposition to change and the required pace of change to keep up with the population growth as well. Affordability is worsening. WA is the least affordable for low-income renters, and this is somewhat new to WA, given our eastern states colleagues have had this problem for far greater than us, but we can't remain complacent and stuck in the idea that WA is affordable. And in particular, WA, beyond mining, is a largely service-based economy with many frontline workers at the risk of being priced out areas where they work. So if you think of your retail workers, education, childcare, police nurses, etc. And social cohesion is probably worth raising there because when there's pressure and cost of living and basic services, as seen in the events on the weekend, these can pose some challenges towards social cohesion and immigration as well. If we switch over to the next slide, please. So whilst the constant boom is posing challenges, growth is a positive nonetheless, and it's fueled from strong government spending and people coming in. Those projects that I mentioned before, whilst again posing challenges, they are really positive that that investment is coming through. Similarly, people need things and services as well, which is driving the resultant economy. And with the challenges of housing affordability now hitting WA, there is a sign of a shift on housing density, which I feel is driven both by affordability concerns and the nature and type of migration from locations where high density is more the norm and an aging population. WA is also in a really strategic location with its proximity to large middle-class cohorts internationally. and sharing, what I will add, is the correct time zone here in WA as well. And this leads me to another point, that whilst concerns over social cohesion are real, it's largely socially cohesive as it is. I previously spoke about Yochi in a LinkedIn post in a different webinar, but more recently, K-pop demon hunters. I don't know if anyone's got school-aged children, but I hear it all over. Someone told me it was the closest that we've gotten to world peace, but I'm not sure about that. But these migrants, bring new connections and opportunities, and most evidently is seen in all our food establishments all over the place that are really pumping and hiving. So I do apologize for getting the K-pop Demon Hunter song stuck in your head, though. Thanks, Crystal. So what should we do? So I think the most important thing we need to do is to understand our people and our places better, so that we can facilitate sustainable growth in your local area. And I want to stress this is not something that I was saying that local governments are responsible to have to do, but definitely to monitor and advocate for your community as well. So what should you measure and monitor? Households, affordability, population futures, supply, community views, policies, what's the pipeline, any tech disruptions along the way, your local economic conditions, your workers, prices, as well as all part of that. And without further ado, I will hand over now to Glenn, who is our resident lead demographer census expert, and he will show you how you can measure and monitor these indicators for your local government. He'll provide an overview of the demographics in Greater Perth, but keep in mind that this can be done at your local area level too, as what Crystal mentioned. Over to you, Glenn.
Thank you, Boris. Yes, Glenn Capuano here. And I think the whole K-pop demon hunters thing must have passed me by. I'm way too old, I think. But great to be here and having a chat about WA and particularly Greater Perth, which is our fastest growing city. I do recognise a few names, been over there a few times. I was just there last week, not at the moment, but we do work with many of the local government areas across Greater Perth and with a series of online information tools. So the information here is presented for, says Metro WA, which is Greater Perth, and that includes the Peel region now. So Greater Perth is in the ABS definition, includes Mandurah and part of Murray Council, as well as all of the sort of more traditionally associated with Perth parts. And a few things about Greater Perth. You can see there's some highlights from our Australia profile. Median age of 37, which is 1 year younger than the Australian average, but pretty close to that. And a relatively higher median income compared to Australia, although on par with the other capital cities in there. One of the interesting features about Perth is it's the city in Australia with the highest percentage of population overseas born. A lot of that is due to the high population from the UK and South Africa. Perth has also got the highest percentage of households with a mortgage, apart from Canberra. So about 40%. A lot of people with a mortgage, and that's indicative of population growth over many years, and the relatively young nature of many of the suburbs. So the population change over 5 years in Western Australia. Now we get an update on population numbers at a local level every year, and at the state level every quarter. We're about to get what will be the March quarter 2025 figures in a couple of weeks. So we'll see how that's been growing. Very topical in terms of talking about migration and all of those sort of things. Australia's population generally relies on migration to grow at all. West Australia has had considerable population growth. In fact, it has been the fastest growing state the last 3 years in a row. And the Greater Perth is really leading that with 88% of all of the population growth going into Greater Perth and about 90% of the overseas migration. You can see there where that growth has been, and it's really strongest around the fringes of Perth and just outside of that. So places like the city of Swan, Armidale, Serpentine, Jarrahdale, Kwinana, Coburn, and up there in the north, the highest growth as a percentage is actually beyond the urban boundary in places like Gingin and Chittering. But every LGA in Perth, and I don't know if you can see the city of Perth in there, but that's also growing very strongly in the inner city area. So very strong population growth. We had lower growth during COVID, but it's really made up for it since then. It's really been playing catch up in the last couple of years. But 23 and 24 years were the most growth recorded in Western Australia ever in numerical terms, and the fastest growing Australia-wide. Slide. So you can see the components of this change. Now, this is specific to Greater Perth, but it mirrors Western Australia overall because, as I said, it's about 90% of overseas migration comes into Greater Perth. Now, in 2021, net overseas migration was negative, and it was only for that 1 year, although the borders were actually closed to WA for about 2 years in there. You had the double closure of the international border and the state border for much of that time. So 2022's growth was fairly subdued as well. But it was nationally. Borders reopened, and then 23 was a record year, and 2024 would have been a record year if not for 2023. You can see those huge components driven by overseas migration, a little bit of internal migration, and you can see the natural increase, which is births minus deaths, fairly flat. In fact, declining a little bit because we have a lower birth rate. So the next month we'll get birth rates information for 2024. Our expectation is that will have fallen a bit further. We're just not having enough children to replace the population in the long term, hence the need for overseas migration. There's certainly debates to be had about the level and type of that migration, but the numbers there for those 2 years really reflect a bounce back after COVID, and the preliminary figures that we've got for the 6 months of 2025 so far are showing a lower migration, but still relatively high in historic terms. The interstate migration, this one always oscillates for Western Australia, so it is up and down. So this one's not just for Greater Perth, this is for Western Australia overall, and it really oscillates depending on the fortunes of the mining industry. But COVID was a real pivot point for interstate migration in Western Australia. It had been negative, although it was tapering back to even around when COVID hit, and then everyone wanted to come to Western Australia. They did their 2 weeks quarantine and started moving in, and they have not stopped moving in since. So it has been strong net interstate migration, more people moving in than out over the last where are we up to 5 years, nearly there. So very strong interstate migration, strong overseas migration, and moderate natural growth, leading to this large increase in population, with Perth at the epicentre. All right, so time to get out your phones and do a little bit of a trivia quiz. And this is just some questions about demographics and characteristics of Greater Perth and the local government areas within it. Remembering that the information that I've shown you is available on your local community profile if you're a subscriber, and various other tools. So, but this is just a little bit of a pop quiz for to go through some of those interesting characteristics. So if we want to start the first one, if you scan that QR code, if you haven't already, if you did that before, then you can just go next, and it should come up with the right question. So the first question there, Crystal, are you able to share that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to do that.
Oh, you're probably already on that question.
Yeah, trying to.
Okay. Anyway, for those of you who have got that on there, the first question is, in 2023-24, Perth was Australia's fastest growing capital city with 3.1% growth. So how many people did that actually represent in 1 year? We've got 4 numbers in there. So I'll give you just a few more seconds to answer those ones, and we'll reveal the answer. I'm not sure how many people we expect. So we've got 11 people logged in there. So we've got answers from 8 there.
I might hit enter
Okay, so the
3, 2,
correct
1.
answer there was 72,472.
I know what's happening here.
Okay. Oh, someone just answered that. Oh, that was me. I got the right answer. Look at that. Yeah.
There we go.
All right, there we go. So that's the correct answer for the number of people, and that was the second highest growth ever recorded for Greater Perth in numerical terms. We do need to differentiate between percentage change and numerical change, as we saw huge growth areas like Wanneroo actually not in our highest tier of percentage growth because the population base is so high to start with, whereas places like Gingin coming up as high percentage growth from a fairly low base. But Greater Perth overall, 72,000 people in 1 year. So next question. According to the 2021 census, which LGA in Greater Perth had the highest proportion of people for whom English was not their first language? So you've got 4 choices there: Belmont, Canning, City of Perth or City of Stirling. Okay, that's probably enough. So the correct answer to that one is the City of Canning, and that's with 42.8% of the population speaking a language other than English at home. It doesn't say anything about their proficiency in English, which is a separate characteristic which you can also look at on the community profile for the City of Canning. But it's well ahead of the next place was City of Perth. Previous census, it had actually been the City of Perth, but City of Perth lost overseas students during the pandemic who went back overseas, in common with many areas with universities in Australia. So Canning took over as the most language diverse. So the next question. City of Perth, one of Australia's biggest local economies, an economic value of 52 billion in City of Perth. Which one's second? Swan, Belmont, Stirling, Canning. Again, so some of the same answers there.
Okay, that's fine. I'll
All right.
reveal the
So
answer.
yeah, the answer is actually Stirling on that one. Not by a lot. It's about $15 billion economy. There are a few, Belmont and Swan very close behind, and Canning a little bit behind that in terms of total numbers. So they're all between that 10 and 15 billion economy mark, and that's from our economic indicators page using our modelled economic data that forms a key part of the economic profile from ID. Next question. How much of Western Australia's employment in defence is located at the Garden Island Rockingham base, naval base? Is it 35%, 45%, 50% or 55%? Again, from Economy ID, the answer there is 55%, so only one person got that. To put it in context, it makes up about 3.5% of Australia's defence employment, but it is more than half of Western Australia's defence employment in there, and that's again from Economy ID. The last question is, which is the only Perth metropolitan LGA with more than 4% of the population identifying as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander? We do, of course, have areas in regional WA which have got 90% plus of identifying as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. But in Perth, which one is the highest? Is it Mundaring, Kwinana, Swan or Armidale? And we've got that one. So the answer there is actually Kwinana. So quite a few people put Armidale, which is up there. But as a percentage, Armidale's had a lot of growth in areas which have got more overseas population, places like Piara Waters on the western side of the LGA. Kwinana now has the highest proportion, which is the only one over 4%. So thank you. Thanks for indulging us with the quiz there. I hope that's been interesting. That's the sort of insights that you can get from your community profile and economic profile for your local area with the ID toolkit, and some of the things that we sort of come across as we present to councils around Perth and around WA. So I'll pass back over to Crystal for the let's get into some info about housing.
Thank you very much, Glenn. And I'll just note too on that Mentimeter there is another quiz there, another slide. So just hold off on that one. That's coming up in just a few slides' time. But as Glenn said, I'll kick on talking about some housing and housing affordability now. So key workers is a pretty critical thing of growing concern to many councils across the whole country. Key workers are typically what we know as those essential workers, so teachers, nurses, police, things like that. But it's important to note that key workers vary from place to place. For a mining town, for example, they'll have a much different key worker demographic to a beachside tourism destination. So whoever they are for you, when these critical workers struggle to afford the local housing, it can have a long and lasting impact on communities and the economy. So when key workers in low paid roles such as early childcare workers, for example, whose roles are vital to the community's wellbeing and functioning, can't afford to live near work, communities can lose those vital services. As tourism is vital to many local economies, housing markets in these areas can be out of reach for the staff who are vital to keep that tourism running. So the cleaners and the admin, etc. Some councils have even had to postpone significant economic development due to a lack of staff. And keeping key workers close to work is best for the economy and the social fabric of a community, but can be a challenge in areas that need to balance that economic stability with community wellbeing. Also large projects, so large infrastructure projects or even a new industry coming into an area will create added demand on local housing stock, often in places where there's already housing strain. So new workers on top of that will also need to be able to afford that local housing market. So in Greater Perth, 12% of all workers are those traditional key workers or what you might know as essential workers, and that's actually the average for Australia overall. In Greater Perth, there's just slightly longer commutes for key workers compared to workers generally. And for Greater Perth, the median individual income for a key worker is just over $1,200, which is only a few dollars short of Greater Perth workers generally. But the staggering thing here is that the proportion of all workers in Greater Perth earning more than $3,000 a week is 9%. But that's only 1% for the key worker constituent. So there's a very vast difference between the high income earning cohort of the proportions of those earning higher incomes of your key workers versus those workers overall. So demonstrating that key workers in Greater Perth are actually far lower paid than the working community generally. So understanding who your local key workers are, their incomes, their commutes relative to other workers will help you understand the level of risk you have in losing these critical services for your community and the impact that that's going to have on your economy and the neighbourhoods. We've helped a number of councils all across Australia define who their key workers are and measure these indicators and plan for support, expansion and the diversification of industry. So perhaps the first step in exploring who your key workers are is to assess, to have a look at maybe the top 10 occupations by number. So as at the census, the top 10 occupations for Joondalup are these that you can see on your screen here. So here we show them and the proportion of all listings, sales listings that would have been affordable to these occupation groups, to the median household income of these occupation groups. So what you can see here is at the 12 months leading up to December 2020, those registered nurses, primary school teachers and secondary school teachers can afford pretty much all of the listings that were there. And you've got a few worker occupations, sales assistants, kitchen hands and childcare workers, only able to afford about 60%, 66, 70% of the sales listings in that time period. But if we look at the state of things now, it has dropped considerably. So those nurses and teachers, they still have more reach into the sales market. However, that's dropped from almost 100% down to about 30-40% of all sales listings. So huge drop for them. And they're the ones that can afford the most. Look at those, the sales assistants, the kitchen hands and childcare workers. So only 4 years ago, they could afford about 60-70% of all listings. Now they can only afford about 7%. And the colour coding there actually demonstrates the bedrooms, the bedroom sizes. So 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom on that sliding scale of shading. So big changes there for the City of Joondalup, and that's actually reflected across the country as well. Housing ID also shows you a way to look at housing affordability, not just by the occupation groups, but by income brackets. So the moderate income bracket there, in the same time period as before 2020, 85% of all sales would have been affordable to a moderate income household, about 50% for the low income household. Now, that low income household can only afford about 4% of all sales listings, and that moderate income household, which is a decent median household income, I might say, is only 15% of all sales listings. This is also mapped in our Housing ID tool. So for the City of Joondalup, you can see here how affordable rentals. I've actually just shown rentals here to give you a view of that market as well. But rentals for a moderate income household for the 12 months up to December 2024 vary across the area. So apologies, I'm not familiar with the townships here, but in this pocket at the top left, you've got 4 listings, which were 8% of the total listings in that area would have been affordable for a moderate income household, 88% in that top right-hand corner, and 57% there in the bottom right. So that just,
I can just interject there that
yeah.
that key one there is Joondalup itself, and we've had a chat to council about that one. So that is mainly due to the increasing supply of high density 1 and 2 bedroom units. So outside of that, your higher socioeconomic areas, particularly along the beach, Burns Beach and Iluka there, very, very low affordability. And really the only pocket there in Joondalup is in that high density. So that can demonstrate how affordability can be influenced by the building of new and different housing forms, but it'll only go so far because a lot of those are going to be smaller units and not that suitable for families.
Thank you, Glenn, and that leads beautifully into the next couple of slides too about the importance of housing fit. So for Joondalup, the mix of housing at the census at 2021, predominantly in those 3 and 4 plus bedroom separate homes. But what's important is to look at how well that fits the local community. So in 2021, I'm not sure if you can see the cursor here, but I'm going to assume you can. Yep. In 2021, you can see that the proportion of large households here is about 30,000 households are large, so families or groups. 2021 here, about 30,000 were the smaller, so lone person and couples. But from that point on, it's the growth in the smaller households that actually grow faster than the large households. So you've got a housing stock there that is fitting for large households, 3 and 4 plus bedrooms, but smaller households are growing in number. And then if you have a look at the pipeline of building approvals, the houses there in the darker shade and other, meaning all units, in the lighter shade, again from 2021, predominantly it's still houses being built. However, as Glenn said, there were a number of units being built more recently, and you can see a bit of growth there in 2025. The Housing ID tool also will map this out as well to show you where those building approvals for houses and units are located in a particular period of time. So just now having a look at housing costs, our partners at PropTrack, which is the realestate.com listings and some others as well, give us, we get all of our listings information from them, and then we do the calculations around affordability. And if you just have a look here at the costs for renting and buying for a median and entry-level home across houses and units, so lots of different indicators there. What's really staggering is the percentage change in the last 12 months. In comparison, when you're looking at places like Victoria, they're at the, like negative growth or very small growth, particularly in the regional area. Whereas here you've got 24% growth in an entry-level house in the last 12 months in Greater Perth. It's just huge. And a recent REA report shows that since 2020, rents have increased more in WA than in any other state, particularly for Greater Perth, where the median rental price increased nearly $300. So that's an 80% increase since the onset of COVID, bringing WA to its worst level of affordability on REA records. So it shows how imperative it is to track rental costs over time and purchase costs. And this also signals an unfortunate shift for WA, but hopefully catalyses a lessening of that complacency regarding the state's affordability. Before we have a look at livability, we'll have a quick look at industry expansion in WA. The National Skills Commission is suggesting growth will be driven in these 5 key areas. And for WA specifically, the government's focusing on these industries here. And just carrying on with our case study, I suppose, of Joondalup. Joondalup came to us to help them have a look at their local economy. They're at a bit of a crossroads. It's been heavily concentrated in health, driven by an ageing population, while growth in finance, professional services and IT is lagging. Rising housing costs risk pricing out those key workers, and the city centre lacks the resident density needed to sustain vibrant retail services and job creation. So without more people living and working in the heart of Joondalup, the city risks missing its potential as a true regional hub. A stronger core population is essential to support longer trading hours, attract investment and create that buzz that draws both talent and business. So we've identified some key focus areas, and the way forward is about momentum and image. Better connecting innovation precincts, modernising the city's brand through high impact development and leveraging public investment to attract high grade office space, Joondalup can accelerate growth. So I mentioned livability. How livable is Greater Perth? So livability, our community views surveys the nation actually, and we also provide this at the local government area as well. But our National Community Views survey showed that residents in Greater Perth rate the livability of their areas higher than the national average. That's driven by, in Greater Perth specifically, the natural environment, feeling safe, health services and access to public transport. So residents in these areas report strong satisfaction with quality of life, reflecting positive experience in those domains compared to other areas of Australia. So for Australia, the livability index is 59.5. For regional Australia, just below that. Metro Australia at 61.2, but for Metro Perth, it's 62.9. So you can celebrate strong livability in your area. And how do we measure this? Our Community Views survey asked participants to rank their top 5 most important values in making a place a great place to live. Then they're asked to rate their experience of that value. So their experience against their highest values determines their livability score. What makes Metro WA, what do those residents in Metro WA value most? That's feeling safe, affordable, decent housing, the natural environment, health services and public transport. So we're going to carry on now with our Mentimeter quiz. If you did scan that code before, you just carry on and open up your screen again. It's still sitting there for you. And what you can do is rank then your experience of these attributes. So how safe do you feel in your local area? How do you feel your access to affordable, decent housing is? What's your experience like with accessing the natural environment or health services or public transport? So I will just bring up the Mentimeter. Excellent. We've got some answers here. We've got 4 out of 11. 5, and we can see it shifting a bit here with everybody that's answering. There's a couple more there still to put your answers in. Okay, so we'll just go with what we've got here. So 6.2, 8.2, 7, 5.7, and 6.4. So what were the actual experiences? Feeling safe is 6.5. You playing along at home have voted that one 6.2. Affordable decent housing, you've put 5. It was actually slightly lower at 4.6. The natural environment, you had 8.2. It's actually lower again at 7.8. The health services, you've put 5.7. It's actually rated with a greater experience there at 6.6, as was public transport, where you put 6.4. So you actually had very good representation of the actual experience as voted by the residents of Greater Perth. So that just shows you how important it is to not just ask how well particular things are going, but how well certain attributes are valued, how highly certain attributes are valued, and then how well that experience, how well that attribute is experienced by that community. So that helps us understand what Greater Perth is doing well. So in rating the experience of all the attributes, most of the top 5 are high up on that list. So that natural environment, health, public transport and feeling safe are quite high up on the list, but falling right down the bottom. Affordable decent housing is right down the bottom of that list, even though it was the second most valuable attribute. So it's no surprise then that the things that are impacting livability are housing related. So the cost of housing, the cost of living, also law and order quite high up on that list. And as I said, we've looked at Metro WA here, but you can get this survey completed at your local government level. City of Canning have done just that. And if you'd like to look that up, you can do so using that link there. We might pop that in the chat as well. And I'll just say there too that if you wanted to have a look at the sites, the housing site, this community views site, profile, atlas or economy for any one of the local areas, you would just type that into the search engine there. That sounds like such an ancient thing to say. And you can find which of those councils have those tools, and you can have a look at what that data represents for them. So wrapping this up now into how to get ahead of the game, we hope that the data that we've shown gives you an idea of the things that are really valuable to measure, but you all know this, but also how to potentially measure them over time using some of our tools, and then how to get ahead of the game. So instead of being reactive and reacting to these issues as they come up, understanding trends over time can help you plan better for the future and make smarter decisions around your policies and plans. So using the past, present and future to analyse and plan for housing, you're reflecting on past trends, migration, settlement costs, housing stress, so looking at the levels of housing stress as at the census. Formal housing stress is only measured at that census point, so 2021 versus 2016. But also, if you look at current housing affordability, that helps you understand the trend of housing stress, how stressful it's been, and the current rates of housing stress and affordability pressure currently. So you also can look at local demand and supply of housing, how well that fits, just as we saw with that Joondalup example, the industries and jobs that are currently in the area, the cost of living and housing and how that compares to your benchmark areas and maybe some other areas as well, and measuring community sentiment currently, and then also looking at that over time. So doing another survey in a couple of years' time and measuring how things have improved. Then looking into the future, so looking at the forecast populations, projected need for housing and services, and also through gathering that community sentiment, what's the community's vision for the future? And how does that align to how the things are panning out for council's plans? And also then looking at industry transitions. So do you have any new industries coming into the area, any large projects, and how that may impact projected need as well? The tools that we supply that can help you with this, we've demonstrated these throughout today. So Profile ID, Atlas ID and Housing ID can help you reflect on the past. housing ID, but then the views and economy, looking at the present picture. And once we get that 2021 census data in as well, Profile and Atlas will provide a more current measure of data as well. And then looking into the future. So again, using views, economy and forecast, looking into that future, as well as things like the key worker analysis. Our consulting team provide certain services that can help really dig deep into analysing who your key workers are and making plans to cater to their needs. We also look at housing needs and capacity analysis as well. So our consulting team really, it's safe to say, do a whole lot of different things. And if you need a hand with anything, please reach out and we'll see if we can be of any assistance. So to close up, what we're really saying here is that communities are really diverse and more mobile than ever. And it's critical to understand who you're planning for at a granular level. So we provide that information today, mostly has been on that greater capital city statistical area, just for the purpose of today. But as you saw with the City of Joondalup, getting down into that local government area level is really critical, as is actually diving even further down to a more granular level, your small areas. And a human level, so understanding the sentiment of your local community in each of those areas as well. So by reflecting on the past, measuring the present and planning for the future and repeating that cycle, you really will get ahead of the game. So pretty much bang on time there. We're going to open up for questions and I'll hand back over to Lisa now. Thank you, Lisa.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or Q&A function, or just raise your hand as well and we can unmute you. We'll give you a couple of minutes just to kind of put anything in there.
While we're waiting, I've got a question. So I mentioned the community views, and that was really interesting. Can you give a little more information about how you do the survey, like sort of the size of the survey? Obviously, you've got that there for all of Greater Perth. Does that mean you've already surveyed all the different local government areas, for example, and you can compare different local government areas? Just a little bit more info on that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Boris, did you want to answer this one? You did the same yesterday.
Yep, I can do this one. So the view survey will work with council to determine what an appropriate sample size is for that population. And we guarantee that survey sample size, and we'll actually do the survey on council's behalf, but council's also able to contribute to that by boosting the sample size beyond our agreed survey sample size. And that means you get more bang for buck. And if you're like Canning, they agreed to 1,200 surveys. They actually got 2,900. That allowed them to get really suburb level insight. So you get out what you put in with that. In terms of us surveying the rest of the country, we have done that work. That won't be a robust enough sample size to cover all the individual LGAs as part of it, but enough to give benchmarks. So the benchmarks that you get from that is Australia as a whole, sort of capital cities as a whole, or inner Perth as a whole. So you can look at Victoria and Brisbane, for example, as a whole, but also regional WA and all the regional benchmarks. So if you're in Metro, you'll get the Metro benchmarks for that.
Interesting. So if you get enough, big enough sample size, you can also go down to the suburb level.
Yeah, we can go down to really granular detail depending on how large the sample size you get. So we always encourage councils, we'll work with you to guarantee that initial sample size, but really, to get the most bang for your buck, just really, use your channels to get it out there. But what Canning did as well was integrated some of that questions in as part of their events, their pop-up booths, to really capture that. And if you look at Canning's website and their view survey, you can actually see like a tale of two cities within the city. So you have an area with lower experiences for livability and areas which really high experiences of livability, which means you're able to target your service and your capital to areas where it needs the most improvement.
Right, thank you.
And I just noticed too, Boris has put the link to Canning's site in the chat. So please do have a look at that, as well as Joondalup's housing site. So thanks for that, Boris.
Cool.
Hey Boris, I have another question on the livability survey. This is just a curiosity one. Out of the local governments that you have kind of taken you up on this, which local government area has had the greatest livability that you've seen?
It's a very, very good question.
You might know those off the top of your head, so sorry, that was a curveball question.
It's probably Canning at the moment, which has the highest livability component of it, but they are going again. So their survey was in November 2023. So the results there, I imagine, will probably shift downward a bit because we're seeing a largely downward trend across the country around livability, and that's driven by housing affordability. So they're planning to do theirs in October again this year. So that will be an interesting one where they'll be able to see the patterns of change from 2023 to 2025.
Interesting. Any other last questions from anyone before we wrap up? No, that's all good. A massive thank you to Glenn, Crystal and Boris for today's presentation. It was awesome. Like I said, we'll be sending a post-webinar email out with the slides, and there'll also be a little survey to get some feedback on future webinars. If you want to have a chat with anyone from the .id team, please feel free to reach out to them or let them know and I can connect you guys. A really quick plug for a few WALGA things that we have coming up. We're looking at holding a number of other webinars and events before the end of the year, so definitely look out for those. Our case study guide that you've probably received a million annoying emails from me about will also be launching in the coming months, and we will do an event around that, so look out for that as well. In terms of keeping in contact with us around all those things that are happening, if you're not registered for our newsletter or part of our Teams group, you are missing out. So I'll add some links in that email I send with how to join, so you can stay up to date with everything that's happening. I promise we don't send out a whole bunch of stuff, so you won't be spammed. And that's it from me. Thank you again to everyone for attending today and for the .id team.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.